Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you, and peace out to the rest of you. You know who it is and what to press. Hit the share button because it's more important than the like and the subscribe button, because the message is more important. Each one, reach one, and teach one. I mentioned this before, but I guess it needed its own title. While we debate as to whether or not we should take the former pookies with us, some of us have gotten things conflated and think that the debate is about whether or not we're going to take the pookies with us. And I'm going to remind the audience again, you can't. You cannot build a Zamunda or a Wakanda with a pookie, with a June bug. If somebody believes the negative stereotypes about himself and what he's supposed to be and lives them out and brings them into reality and makes them flesh, he can't come with us to build Zamunda. And if you can't build Zamunda, you can't build Wakanda. Now, I'm using these fictitious locations, of course, to stand for something that we're conceiving of and trying to put together. At the end, what I'm getting at is that we simply can't take negative elements. And this is not just us. This goes for anybody. Italian Americans, in large part, were not a part of La Cosa Nostra. Most of them knew some guys that were mobbed up or some wise guys, but they weren't in it. Now, they didn't necessarily spit on these cats for a long time. And there was a point where people who were not wise guys and who were not mobbed up would pretend to be. So we're not the only people in the world that have this issue. But again, the Italian community was not defined by this for at least after a certain date, nor did they define themselves by this. And what it meant was that if several of them decided that they were going to do something legitimate, they were not going to be able to take the wise guys with them. So, in the end, you could not be a priest and be a wise guy. You had to pick one. You're going to go into the church and the priesthood, or you're going to go into La Cosa Nostra. Because La Cosa Nostra had this code of omertà, that means you talk or you die. They also had another rule, and that is that if you were by your dying mother and you get a phone call from another wise guy, you got to show up. And you didn't even have to be that highly ranked and a wise guy in order to have that. You were supposed to turn your back on dying relatives of your family in their final moments if you got that phone call from a higher up wise guy. It was bad. So you would think that the federal government would have gone in on them first before going in on black liberation groups, because these guys were actually criminals. But it just goes to show you that white America is seriously against you, and its religion is white supremacy. So that does exist. This is something that I've said to the conservative side of the argument must keep in mind. No, it does exist. You can't sit up and act like it's not a thing. That outside interference is guaranteed. You build Black Wall Street, you build Zamunda. You build Wakanda, they're coming to get you before you get to the Zamunda levels. You build Negro Town and they're coming for you. Believe that. And one of the ways they'll do it is that they will send in a few of the so-called pookies, not ex-pookies, but pookies, current day ones, to infiltrate. So if you're on the conservative side, which I somewhat am, don't underestimate the outside interference that is waiting. They're not playing games with you. They never were. We were brought to the Americas to be on the bottom, and they are intent that somebody's going to be there. And they're not unanimous on letting some other group replace us at the bottom so that we can move up. They're not unanimous on that. So that being said, we're debating because we got something conflated. What we got conflated was Pookie and ex-Pookie. Now that I've made them different again, which we already know consciously are different, let me tell you one more thing. Pookie, we already know can't come. We need to be unanimous about that. Now, if you're on a conservative side of the argument, you automatically dismiss someone that says that someone who is still doing this stuff can come with us. They can't. But the debate, as I've said before, is about the X. However, you got to have a standard by which you determine that somebody is X and not currently, right now, that negative stereotype, the IDNS. How do you do that? Again, I am proposing the Malcolm X standard. Now, this means that at whatever point they decide to not be a knucklehead, they don't just say, I'm going to stop being a knucklehead and stop running with the wrong crowd, but that they do say, I'm actually going to do things that they don't approve of. The knuckleheads in a wrong crowd must disapprove of some things that I'm going to be doing. They don't look up to literacy, become literate. That is the minimum standard. Now, everybody that disagrees with me about making adult age-appropriate levels of literacy in one's first language a minimum standard writes to me and they misspell and mispunctuate, showing that they're not adult age-appropriate literate in their first language if it's English. Now, I said in your first language, if somebody's first language is French, fine. But they need to be literate at their age-appropriate level in French. Both the formal textbook French and whichever dialect of French they have. For us, it's English. We should be literate at the appropriate level for our age in English, both the formal textbook English and AAVE. Now, some have said we should have our own English. I think we do. The question might be the spelling of it, but when I talk about the spelling, I'm not really getting into the AAVE that much. But if you're going to write in standard textbook English, formal English, then you should be able to spell correctly in it. If you misspell some words at a very advanced level, they're industry-specific jargon, that's one thing. I'm not knocking that. But let's say you either one, AAVE, standard English, Creole French, standard French, or formal French, international French. Whatever the case is, if you are too stupid to punctuate between sentences, you're an idiot. At least as far as writing goes. You don't need to be writing anything to tell somebody else something. You can't correct somebody else in written form. Whatever you're correcting them about. You could be telling them that they got the dates wrong for a historical event. You still make yourself look dumb when you start these run-on sentences. Pookie is the one that thinks this is lame. Ray thinks that this is white folk stuff and that me talking about it is elitism. This is one of the reasons why we need to make this a minimum standard. If Pookie can't reform to the level that he does exactly what he used to think is lame, then we can't say that he met the Malcolm X standard, because when Malcolm at one point would have thought all this reading and stuff was lame, and he said he was darn near illiterate. He said it in his autobiography, but then he was writing an autobiography. He had help, but he was writing an autobiography. He at least learned the proper meanings of words. Most people today don't do that. If I sat up here and I told you right now that my colleague's relative died, some of you would write in, oh, I'm sorry for your lost. Y-O-U''RE instead of the possessive, lost, L-O-S-T, which is an adjective or a past tense verb. It's not a noun, L-O-S-S, loss. That's the noun. And you can't tell the difference, but then you want to say, oh, you know what I meant. And then you misspell that too. Sorry, dummy, we don't have room for that. Not among grown folks. This has to be the minimum standard, because this is actually what is going to be that switch in the head. If Pookie still thinks that this is lame, he's still Pookie. He's not an ex-Pookie. He's not a reformed Pookie. Even if he's an ex-Pookie, he's still not reformed. He may stop being Pookie, but in order to go with us to build Zamunda or Wakanda, you're going to have to be against it. The next criteria involved in that Malcolm X standard is that they are at war with the ones that want to stay in that lifestyle. They'll sit up and say, well, you know, I got access to places you don't because you educated and you've been this way all your life. Oh, so because I never went down this IDNS path, you have access to places I don't. Okay, fine. If that's really the case, use that access in a way that I can't. Go to war with the ones that still would grant you access into these areas. The ones that are going to let you in because you still got golds and some tattoos and nigger swagger, cell block swagger, go in, get their access, and cut their feather-mucking heads clean off. Drop their bodies because they chose it, because they looked at the reforms that you made, or if they knew about the reforms you made, they would say that you were lame. So take them out. We don't need them. Make sure they never give bad advice to another youngster again. Now notice, unlike others, I'm not talking about the hood versus the suburbs per se. Because straight up, if a teenager has reached puberty and he's in the suburbs swaggering around, trying to dominate other kids, acting like he's from the streets, take him out with you too. We don't need them either. Matter of fact, drop them off in the hood so that they'll be done away with naturally, sniffed out, identified, and done away with. We don't need them. We don't need anybody that glorifies, no matter what income level their parents have and what neighborhoods they started their lives in and walking around. It doesn't matter. That mindset must go. And if you're truly reformed, and you think that because you used to do this bad stuff, it gives you an advantage to take the ones out when they refuse to take the reforms that you did. They don't want to meet that, and I mean the Malcolm X standard level of reforms. They want to preach, but they still in them streets. And I do what I got to do, man, but I got a head on my shoulders. Oh, but well, what do you have to do? Because the minute you have to do something that involves having a victim, especially when that victim is someone else that is poor or black, let alone both, you still a pookie. You still an IDNS. We don't need you. And as a matter of fact, we need you gone. You won't reform to that Malcolm X standard that you previously thought was lame. We need you gone. And it's one of the things that I'm going to give. People can say all that they want about, black Sunni Muslims are sellouts to the Arabs and to the back of the bus, to the back of the camel. They can say that. I went to college in Atlanta, like I told y'all, and we all heard about the West End. And what we know was that the Muslims told drug dealers and pimps in certain areas, cut this mess out. And we don't mind helping you find some work that's actually going to be good for you, but cut this mess out. And when they didn't, some of them were never seen or heard from again. This might have bothered some of the people in the APD. I'm sure it did. But by the same token, it would have been a relief as well if they're really serious about law enforcement. So yeah, some of them were gone. Now, there was a man I worked with in Atlanta that told me that, yes, they actually did kill some of them. He said one of the ways they preferred to do it was to lock them in the trunks of older cars that you can't get out of from the inside, and just burn the cars and cook them to death slowly. I said, wow, that's a cold-blooded way. I mean, I know we Muslims aren't allowed to do it. And that's why I doubt that this was the way that the ones of them who were killers did this. And so I doubt his story. But what he was expressing was a lack of remorse at the deaths of the IDNS that would not heed the warnings. Now, amongst the Muslims that were cleaning up the neighborhood, you had several actual reformed IDNS. But those reformed IDNS and reformed pookies amongst the Muslims had taken on a level of reform that they previously would have considered lame. Now, I don't know if it was necessarily the Malcolm X level of reform with regards to literacy. I'm not sure, but I had to throw that in there for now. What I can say is that for the most part, their hearts were in the right places. They would take out guys they used to do the dirt with. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. They would take out the guys with whom they used to do the dirt if these men did not heed the warnings. Many of them fled, though. For the most part, someone else said, no, we never gave orders to take these cats out. A lot of them fled, went somewhere else. In either case, I don't necessarily believe the story of the guy that told me that they took some out and one of the ways was to burn them in the trunks of cars, because we would have heard about, several deaths like that. I'm assuming, as far as I know. But I do understand that there was no remorse about the deaths of the former, about the deaths of the current and insistent pookies and IDNS, thugs and Junebugs. That I understand. That was the attitude. Whatever happens to them, nobody mourns. Them niggas got to go. Well, we need something like that amongst us. This is necessary. We do not need what it is that we've been glorifying before. We don't need somebody with cell block swagger walking up and telling us that because he's got bass in his voice and some tats and look like he's been in a prison weight yard for a while and got some goals, that somehow that makes him better than those that never went that jigaboo route to begin with. We can't afford that. It doesn't make you a better dad per se. And one of the things I notice is that in these movies, and granted these are movies, but in these movies where you've got a white guy with a history like that, and then he's turned over a new leaf and settled down with the family, he does not keep the affectations that tell you that he used to be in a life of violence. I've seen some movies like that. And when they turned over a new leaf, they did not keep the affectations of the old life. If they had goals, they got them done with porcelain. If they had tats and they were doing well, they got them removed, at least from where you could see them. But they didn't have to keep these old affectations that tell you this person's a thug. It's like nowadays in our communities, the ex-IDNS, the ex-pookie, wants to still look like he's doing the same dirt. He wants you to misjudge him as still being a pookie when you see him. And only when you get to know him, you realize he ain't about that no more. And he still writes like he's in them streets. Talks like he's in them streets. Misuses words out of their proper meanings like he's in them streets. And I'm not just talking about when the meanings normally change due to AAVE. I'm not talking even about that. No, I'm talking about just outright regular run-of-the-mill mundane words. He doesn't even know what they mean and he's misusing them. And bragging that somehow he's superior. And let me tell you all this. I mentioned this before about London. There's an Imam, Muhammad Hoblos, and he has talked about this before. He's mentioned how you've got some Muslims there in London, and they insist on marrying the guys that used to be the roadman. It's what they call their pookies. And so we're talking about cats that were born to Muslim parents and then went wayward so they could be roadmen for a while and then decided to practice their religion. But they picked up bad habits while they were roadmen. When they come back into the masajid, they don't let all these habits go. He said that what normally happens is a pattern. She falls in love with a roadman. She wants to marry the roadman. She tells her parents, I know he's got the tattoos and all that, but he's not like that anymore. MashaAllah, he's practicing now. He's reformed. He's different now. And then they get together, they marry against her parents' better judgment, and she does not find him still drinking, dealing drugs usually, committing robberies or knife crimes. That's not what it is. What it is she finds that he still has an ex-girl or he still has a girlfriend from his roadman days. That's the thing that they find hard to give up. They can drop the other stuff, but not that. Now, why was that? Because, see, when they were roadmen, that was available to them. And they weren't giving that up. I mean, they may repent of everything else. They may have even repented for that, but that's not something that they just readily gave up. And then commonly speaking, these ladies find out that he still has a girlfriend. Or off and on, he goes to see her, whatever the case is. And he said, what about the guy that never went down that path to begin with? Why should they always be left out? Now, granted, I understand choice and their right to a preference, but his question was valid to ask them. I mean, there's the choice, but there is the consequence for that choice and that preference. And if they insist that a man's got to go through that roadman phase in order to qualify as a real man, and this is what they're doing in London, then why should she not pay some kind of price for the standard she has insisted upon? And it's the same thing with us. One of the reasons why these men go through those phases in our neighborhoods, in our communities, is frankly because never going through that phase means it almost guarantees he cannot be with a black woman later on in life. It damn near guarantees it. And that means there's a problem with both genders. Correction. Because most of these IDNS and pookies amongst us, I mean, you add them all up together, and I'm sure that they don't make up even half of our population. Even in neighborhoods where they hold the sway, everybody doesn't like them, doesn't look up to them. They may have the power, but people they don't necessarily like them and respect them. Most of the people in these bad low-income neighborhoods that we call the hood and the community, many of them, if we're honest about it, many of them are sick of it. They don't like it. They don't like these folks. But this minority that they make up, and the statistics have proven this minority that they make up is the one that has the most reproductive success in the communities. And this means that not only do we need to leave them behind, but this is where the real kicker, this is where the real population shrink is going to come. All the African American women that like them, either because they are IDNS or they were IDNS, must be left behind. Straight up. The minute she says something about, yeah, but see, they come across as more, gone. Danica Marie, sorry. Not because I hate her, but because even she stood up and saying, well, you nice guys could learn something from them. No, it's just like when I told you all about my experience teaching. At some point, we teachers have to say, no, we're not going to change to suit your cheating culture. You need to change to catch up with the rest of the world that's right while you're wrong. This is something that we had to say to the students. Somewhere down the line, this had to come from the top to the bottom. And now if you teach where I taught years ago and you're still doing it today, you will notice an improvement. But that improvement had to come from somebody at the top insisting, no, we do not change to suit them. If their tribe, if the culture, if how normal they think cheating is, it's wrong. They need to suffer the consequences. We don't change. They better change. It's what had to happen. It's the same thing with us. We don't need to change to be more like them because there's only one other culture where that's a problem. And that's the white Western culture. But as you know, they're paying, and they don't have that problem to the same extent we do, but they're paying for it as much as they have it. So if we always get away with less than what they get away with, we now know that we're going to pay more for this problem, and we have it to a greater degree. So we're going to pay 4 times what they would pay just for that problem alone. And let's look at the stats. The stereotype and then the stats. The stereotype, black men run around making babies, raw dog, cream pies, busting nuts, and they don't stick around and help out at all. Don't help mom, don't help babies. In reality, 51% of black adult males are childless and unmarried. 31% are married, got kids. So that means that's 82% of black adult males that are not even absent dads. That's 82%. Now you've got 18% that are left that don't live with the kids or with the mother. Notice I said with the kids or with the mother. Now you're going to have to subtract, and I don't know what these stats are, but you're going to have to subtract the ones that live with the kids and not with the moms, the ones that are custodial parents, the ones that are widowers. We're going to have to subtract all of them. I don't know what you're left with. But it can't be even 18% of these men that are out here busting these nuts and leaving 80% of black women with kids out of wedlock. Can't be 18%. What the F? Well, actually, I'm not saying 80% of the women, but 80% of the births are out of wedlock. I don't know what percentage of the women are having them, but we do know that it's over 18%. I forgot what it was, but it was some large percent of black adult women that even have babies, and 80% of them are having them out of wedlock. But I don't know what the percent is that's even having babies. What I do know is that it's a large percentage. So you've got exactly what we've been saying. You've got a bunch of ladies with options funneling themselves into the same few guys' bedrooms, competing for these same few guys. Because we know there ain't no sister around there that likes to share her man, but they're sharing their men. And while they're sharing their men, we don't feel a guck why. If it's not polygyny, for the shuck up, her attitude's the wrong one to have. Bounce her butt out of here too. She can't come to Zamunda with us, let alone Wakanda. Same thing, and we owe no apologies for this. If he has to have nigger cell block swag and tats and golds and something that scares other black men just for you to respect him, you're an animal, woman. We don't need you. Your standards are animalistic. You can have them, but you stay right there with him and deal with the consequences of those standards. And when you find out you sharing him, fuck the shuck up, because we told you that was going to happen. Anyway, that Malcolm X standard is going to have to be our minimum. That means they have to go against what the F they used to be. They must go against it and be the lame they would have made fun of back then. And even if they didn't make fun of lames, they need to become the lame they saw and were afraid to be made fun of for being back then. They must reverse and turn 180 degrees. They don't have to have white folks' way of thinking and white folks' standards. I actually don't want them to have it. They need to have progressive black folks' standards. What is good for us? Anything you're going to do that involves aggression needs to be against our enemies, not against us. That's what we got to understand. And the other thing too, never, ever, ever, if you are a former IDNS or pookie, never act like you've got something about you that's superior to those that never went that route. And if you never were an IDNS or a pookie, don't ever let any of them act like they're superior to you because you never went that route. Don't let that message go across anymore. And oftentimes, it's really not the reformed IDNS and the pookies that are putting that message out there. It's not always them. A lot of times, it's other people that aren't them putting its message out there. No, they're better than you because they used to do this, that, and the other. They can reach the youth that you can't reach. No, F them youth then. The youth should be able to listen to both. The reformed ex-IDNS and the one that was never an IDNS. They should be able to hear both stories. But if the youth can only listen to one story, F that youth. I don't care if that little nigga's 12. Let him go down that path. School to prison pipeline. That same one that I hate, I'm going to sit up here and thank God for if that kid cannot hear what somebody's telling him because they never walked that IDNS path. Oh, that's how you think? All right. Okay. So you actually are that stupid. Fit the guck out my face with that. You're going to deal with exactly what you don't want to deal with at this point. Prison, guards, and no women. It must be like that. And I'm saying this even if you're Muslim. If you went into prison and you came out a mu'min with a sajda mark on your forehead, but you think you are superior to those that never went that route. Granted, you have insight into certain things that never went that route, but if you think you are superior to those that never went that route, same thing. However, most of you don't have that problem, but if you're one of those that ain't like that, but you see them and you think they're superior to those of us that never went that route, if you think that, that I'm someone like me is a lesser Muslim because we didn't become Muslim in prison, never had to be incarcerated to be introduced to it, and that's what you think, hey, guess what? You can't come with us. The actual reformed IDNS can. You can't because you're supporting a necessity of going through that IDNS phase to begin with. Because you're supporting it, don't come along with us. You're not welcome in Zamunda, so you definitely ain't going to see Wakanda. This needs to be our standard. A very militant standard for them to meet. A very difficult one for them to meet if they're still in that mindset. And a very easy one for them to meet if they truly, truly, truly realize how morally repulsive and repugnant the IDNS Pookie way of life is. Definitely. I hope that one day this won't be necessary anymore. That it won't be true. In the meantime, I hope it helps. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum. And black, heterosexual, male, non-former IDNS power just because they don't like it.